Jason Voorhees, Bloody Hunt. They say Crystal Lake is cursed, not in fairy tales, not in fiction. For real. The equipment doesn't work there. No animals live there. Even the birds flew around the place as if they sensed that something lived there. Something that couldn't be killed. Something that never forgot. It all started at the beginning of summer. The opening of the camp. Children's laughter. New tents built on the ashes of the old building. The management decided to forget the old story, the old blood, the old screams. They erased all mentions of him. They removed his name from the database. They stopped scaring the newcomers. But Jason Voorhees didn't forget. There was no rain that night, no thunderstorm, just stars and a whispering forest. Ordinary silence, until she started humming. A chainsaw. At first they thought it was one of the guards, but 5 minutes later the entire first building was covered in blood. Jason burst through the wall into the cabin, a mask on his face, emptiness in his eyes. The roar of the saw drowned out the screams. He walked, cutting through walls and bodies at the same time. The children did not even have time to stand up. He carried the saw through the bodies as if through cardboard. One, another, a third. A boy trying to hide under the bed was sawed in half. A girl who climbed out the window fell right into his arms, and he simply picked her up and plunged the saw into her stomach, slowly, with a crunch of bones. By morning, there was not a single living person left in the camp. Only bodies, and a massacre that went down in history as the worst tragedy in the history of the state. The police arrived in the afternoon. What they saw was inexplicable. The bodies of children without heads, traces of blood on the trees, fingers, hair, eyes, all mixed into a mess that flew across the camp. The walls were marked with saw chains. The air smelled of gasoline and rot. A special team was assigned to investigate. 10 people, trained, armed, with maps, thermal imagers, and instructions. Find and eliminate. But they had one mistake. They thought it was a man, and Jason Voorhees was no longer a man. First, Sergeant Hopkins disappeared. He was found without arms and tongue. His pistol lay nearby, fused to his skin. Then 2 detectives followed the tracks into the forest. One was hanging from a tree, the other was cut in half by a chainsaw from shoulder to hip, as if a butcher had decided to show anatomy live. The radio picked up only one sound, whiz-zzz. Then the hunt began, but not the police. Jason hunted them. He knew where they slept, where they hid. He was breaking down their shelters, punching through walls. One officer hid in the basement. Jason slowly cut a circle in the door and peered inside. Only eyes, only darkness. Then a saw, in the stomach, in the ribs. A scream that did not go away, because there was already death all around. The team leader, Lieutenant Garner, set up an ambush. The entire squad lined up with machine guns, cameras, traps, lights. They waited an hour. 2. In the 3rd hour, smoke began to come out. Then one by one, the lights went out. They realized that he was already inside. Within 15 minutes, all 8 police officers were dead. One with a ripped open stomach, another with a torn off jaw. The third had a saw cut from the groin to the chest, leaving flesh that was still twitching. One shot himself in the head because he knew that death would be worse. Jason walked out onto the shore. He stood by the water. There were drops of blood on his mask. In his hand was a saw. His breathing was even. He looked at the lake, as if he could hear screams in its depths. He was not a man. He was a curse, a living hell. Silent, fearless, unstoppable. The next morning help arrived. No one was found. Only traces of chains, and one inscription on the ground made of skulls. I do not hide, I wait. Jason Voorhees. Since then, Crystal Lake has been empty. It has become a forbidden zone. But deep in the forest, sometimes you can still hear a sound. That same one. Mechanical, raucous, endless. Psst. And if you hear it, then you are already too close.